I'm Erica Lukes, host of UFO Classified. For me, life isn't simply black and white. Life is full of many unknowns. It is my goal to travel the world and to work with the world's leading experts in the hopes of making groundbreaking discoveries. Join me on UFO Classified Friday nights at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, only on KCOR.
Turn left and then down the river.
UFO Classified. UFO Classified. No more plausible deniability. Fact, fiction, or the truth. You decide. And now, the new voice of the high desert, the hostess of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes.
Well, happy Fantopia Friday. I am Erica Lukes. Always happy to be here and to have lively conversations and to push boundaries. I love Friday nights on KCOR. It means the world to me to get in there and see my friends in chat who support the show. Susan, David, Cheryl, Ben, everybody. And especially Northern UFOs. I want to give a big thanks to Northern UFOs for all of his support, for his help spreading information out about the show. And all of you mean the world to me. I would rather have 50 good listeners that are intelligent and capable of making rational decisions than have 100,000 people that want to believe everything that they're presented. I really respect my audience, and I'm grateful that we're all in this together. So anyway, there you go. Happy almost Halloween, by the way. I have been anxiously awaiting my big Halloween party, which is tomorrow night. I think I've got my costume going on. I'm sure some of you who are my Facebook friends saw my dry run last week at my makeup and things, but this is my favorite time of year. I love it. So I hope you all have Halloween plans and enjoy it. Of course, behind the scenes, I am busy doing research, and things will continue to unfold with regard to Skinwalker Ranch and some of the new explosive allegations that are being made by two former Bass employees that were right here on this show talking about that. If you haven't listened to Chris Marks and Chris Bartell, listen to that interview. I highly recommend it. It will change the narrative that has been presented about Skinwalker Ranch. This is really important. So tonight I am here with someone that I actually think the world of. I had the pleasure of speaking at the conference he puts on down in Enberg, Texas, and it was one of the best conferences that I've ever been to. I loved the vibe and the people and the fact that, you're getting education from intelligent speakers, and you also have this very lively, people are wearing alien costumes, people are bringing their pets. It was lovely. Noe, thank you again for that. I just want to say that really meant the world to me to be there at your festival, and you're going to have to talk a little bit about that. So thank you for inviting me. That was great. But I am here with Noe Torres, who is a brilliant researcher. He's an author, publisher, UFO investigator. He belongs to MUFON and has authored a number of books related to UFOs and appears at conferences and all over the place. He holds a bachelor's in English and a master's in library science from the University of Texas at Austin. With California researcher and one of my dear friends, Ruben Uriarte, he has written 4 acclaimed books: Mexico's Roswell, The Other Roswell, Aliens in the Forest, and the Koyami Incident. In addition, his books, The Real Cowboys and Aliens, UFO Encounters of the Old West, Fallen Angel, and Ultimate Guide to the Roswell UFO Crash have also been very well received. And yes, they have. They're incredible books. I am also joined by his co-author on The Real Cowboys and Aliens tonight, John Lemay, who is a lifelong Roswell native and past president of the Historical Society for the Southeast New Mexico. How cool is that? I love that. Lemay has authored many books on the history of Southeast New Mexico and the Southwest, including Roswell, USA, and the Real Cowboys and Aliens, which we're going to talk about tonight. I got a copy of this book, and I cannot put it down. I am entranced at the research that they have put into this. And so I'm really excited. Thank you both for being here tonight.
I'm glad to be here, Erica. Thank you.
I know, and I cannot believe that you and I have not crossed paths before.
I haven't really done a lot in ufology recently. Noe and I did our first Cowboys and Aliens book about almost 10 years ago now. And so Noe and I haven't talked very much for the past 10 years either. So it's kind of interesting.
Well, time flies, doesn't it? I'm telling you, I just think the historical cases are so important. And I love the fact, and I wanted to ask, each of you a little bit more, and we'll do this after we get back from the first break, but I want to find out more about your research process for your books, because it's, like I said, you've done incredible work. But John, first I want to pick your brain and find out more about you. Like, give us your background, give us some details.
Well, I have a unique perspective having grown up in Roswell. I've lived here all my life. I've never moved away, never lived anywhere else. As a kid, I actually mowed one of the witnesses' lawns, Robert Shirkey. So I knew him. I met Glenn Dennis. I've heard things from people around town, the old timers, I guess you could call them now, that are really, really interesting. So, yeah, I definitely have some insights as to what the real Roswell is like. I don't ever like false advertising. Noe is a ufologist. I'm not a ufologist at all. I'm just a historian. I work with the Historical Society here in Roswell, so I love finding these interesting stories, but Noe's the one with the real smarts as far as, UFOs and extraterrestrials go. I'm more maybe along the lines of a folklorist or something like that.
But that is so cool. I would love to do what you do. And maybe in my spare time I can take that up, but it's fascinating to know the history, especially of a place, like Roswell and the Southwest and all of that. What a fun thing for you to do. And you're so young.
I used to be young. I don't know if I'm still young. I was young when I started. I don't know.
Wow. So what was it like growing up in Roswell, and how big? Because a lot of us have not been to Roswell, and so just give us a little description of what living in Roswell is like.
So it wasn't always, all aliens all the time. I was born in 1985, so let's see, we didn't really take off with the whole tourism thing about the UFO crash until 1997 for the 50th anniversary. And that's when, alien cutouts would pop up in the store windows along Main Street. And then before you know it, we've got a McDonald's built like a UFO. We have a Baskin Robbins right next to it with a giant alien. So I would say, as far as the alien stuff goes, that's more along Main Street. Locals don't talk about it a whole lot unless it's July during the UFO festival. So, in that regard, it's not just constantly UFOs, but and I'm sure it's like that everywhere. Like I'm sure the people that live in Salem, Massachusetts probably get tired of talking about the witches after a while. You know what I mean?
Right. Obviously it's a good thing for tourism, and it gives the town some extra money, but are there people that are really dead set against it?
No, I think you get kind of spoiled living in a town of Roswell's size. It's just right. It's about 50,000 people. And I think the only thing that people don't like is in July, when all the people are here, the traffic gets bad. And I would say that's the only reason they don't like it, but they have to realize that pumps a lot of money into our economy. So,
right.
You got to put up with a little bit of that,
And so, with Roswell, we all know that is the big case of the century, but what have you gleaned from anybody that has lived there? Have you been able to establish any, I'm sure you've established good relationships to find out information, but have you found anything out that blows your mind?
Yes. My perspective is the people. The people here are more specifically that the greatest generation, from World War II that was here that saw the alleged UFO crash. I don't really see why all of those men would get together and make up the same fake story. I'm not totally naive. I know that if you were a part of the incident, sure, you can write a book. Sure, you can make a little money off of it. But I don't think that's why they did it, just so they could write their books and have some notoriety. I think that they really did see something that really shook a lot of them. And, as I said, I got to meet a few of them before they passed away, and there are still a few old timers around town that knew them and will tell stories. And so I mean, I guess you could say if I didn't live in Roswell, I don't know that I would believe, but just having known all of the people here, I mean, it definitely adds my belief in the incident,
That's interesting. Well, hopefully one day I will get down there and I'll get to see Roswell and go to the crash site and meet you. That would be a lot of fun to do that. I can't believe I haven't, actually.
Well, anytime you're here, I'm happy to show you around.
That would be wonderful. Oh my gosh, I love it. I love it. And so Noe, and I want to just bring Noe in. I mean, Noe, you wrote a great book with Ruben Uriarte about the Mexican Roswell. Will you tell us a little bit about that?
Erica, first of all, thank you so much for having both of us on the show tonight. I've just been sitting back here and enjoying John's summary of what it's like to have grown up in Roswell and still to live there. It's an amazing town. I really enjoy it a lot. It's not that dissimilar from where I grew up here in South Texas in Edinburgh, where you mentioned that we have an annual UFO conference, which we were very happy a couple of years ago that the Edinburgh UFO conference was ranked the third best UFO conference in the world by lists. So
that is so cool.
So we were just floored with that recognition, because this is our 9th year coming up of the festival, and it's had like all conferences, we've had some lean years and we've had some really good years, and sometimes the city administration, which by the way we're probably also unique in that we are one of the few UFO conferences that's completely funded by the city government, the local city government.
That's incredible.
As a tourism outreach. So there's been some years when the organizing committee thought, well, maybe we shouldn't continue this. Maybe there aren't enough people to support it. But then it grew and grew and grew, and now nobody talks like that anymore. Everybody's talking about planning the next one and getting more interesting speakers down. Our conference is always held the first weekend of April, so it's a spring conference. And we had you down here a couple years ago, which was really a fantastic conference that year, and we've had even more since then. But Edinburgh and Roswell are very similar, interestingly enough, in terms of population and the way the town is laid out. And there's no way I can even compare the UFO incident that happened here in Edinburgh with the one in Roswell. We had a little it's not well known, the incident that happened here. And of course, Roswell is the world's most famous UFO story. But still, in kind of a localized sort of way, we had a very eerie episode that happened north of town back in 1966, which kind of is what created or generated the initial push to have an annual UFO event here. And so, yeah, but one of the best days in my life was the day that John Lemay and I got together, because he's a fantastic person for me to work with and to bounce ideas off of. And it's, in a way, he mentioned that he really doesn't consider himself to be a UFO researcher, but in a way that's really, really good, because he balances my interests and my focus very well when we do a book together. He is the person that can give me feedback if I'm not providing enough information about the UFO side of things, and then I can help him with the chapters that he's working on. And I really feel like John and I balance each other very well. So having met John in Roswell during the many times that I was an invited speaker at the annual Roswell UFO Festival, That's one of the greatest things that has happened to me, Erica, because even though John and I had gone several years since we last worked together, we picked it up right away, and this past summer we just decided right away that we were going to do a series of books together. We have now written 2, which have not been released yet. We're just releasing the first one now, but we've already completed a second book, and we are almost done with the third. It's going to be a trilogy.
Wow.
So we'll talk more about that during the course of the evening.
Well,
but yeah, it's. I didn't even get to your question about Reuben, but we can discuss that further as we go along.
yeah, and that honestly, I love the book that you two wrote together, and I think that Reuben is an exceptional researcher.
He helped tremendously with both our original book that John and I did 10 years ago, which, by the way, our original book titled "The Real Cowboys and the Aliens" was a little over 100 pages, and it was aimed at the middle school student audience. And John and I, subsequent to the publication of the book, we spoke at schools and we told interesting stories about real UFO cases that were reported back in the 1800s. And it was a very successful book for the target audience that we were looking at. But the amazing thing that we found was, as we went out and spoke about the book, there were a lot of UFO researchers and people in ufology that really liked that tiny little book, which wasn't really aimed at that audience. So I know John and I had talked many times, even though it didn't come into fruition until recently. We had talked many times about really buckling down and doing a whole series of books about UFO cases in the 1800s, which is the point where we've gotten to now, is with the current series of books that we are working on. But that's how it all started, with a little 100-page book that we were targeting at school kids, which was immensely popular. We received really good reviews and a lot of positive feedback from other folks in the UFO community. And that led to what we're doing now is we've gone back, and all those cases that we had found when we did the little tiny book, we had found a whole bunch more cases. And John and I were like, maybe in the future we can really do this topic justice and really do a really lengthy book that's aimed more at adults, which is what we've done this time. And we're real happy at how it has turned out.
Well, so how do you do your research for the book?
Well, originally I had a lot of stories. John approached me. He had heard, we had both heard that Steven Spielberg's movie was coming out, The Cowboys and Aliens, fictional piece, which has nothing to do with real cases at all, and was totally Hollywood-driven, mishmash of cowboy movies and alien invasion movies. But anyway, we had heard that movie was coming out, and John approached me because we had met through my activities at the annual Roswell UFO Festival, and so he approached me about possibly doing a historical-based treatment of UFO encounters from the time period of cowboys, the 1800s of North America. And so he approached me about that, and I thought it was really interesting. And I happened to have had some files based on my earlier UFO books that Reuben and I had worked on, and I was working on some myself also. I had developed a number of case files from the 1800s, mainly in the Southwest, mainly in Texas, of UFO encounters that occurred in that time period. So I told John that I thought it was doable to do a small book about cases that occurred during the 19th century, and so we embarked on that first book. However, we were soon both, as we did the historical research and looked at the newspaper archives, and magazine archives from the time period, we went to the original sources of that time. I always preach to people that you can't go with second or third hand sources. You've got to get back to as close as possible to when the event happened. So we were doing a lot of archival research, both in libraries and in the online databases that now make a lot of those early publications available online. And we were finding so many cases, Erica, that we were just overwhelmed. I mean, I had a backlog of cases. Now, when we did the first little book, because it was really targeted to school-age kids, and we really had a particular, we had a particular audience, and a particular objective was to show people that, yes, there were UFO sightings even way back during the cowboy period of North America. Because of that, we limited the number of stories that we covered in that book. But we knew that there was a backlog of material that there was no way we were going to be able to even scratch the surface of. So then when we started working again a few, earlier this year, John and I picked up, even though we hadn't worked together for a number of years on a book, we picked up right where we left off after the first book. And we took a look at those files that we had previously just barely looked at, and we knew they were good, but we held off on them. And then since that, we've had a lot more archival material develop, and one case leads to another. In the UFO literature, we found mention of additional cases that we hadn't even uncovered the first time. Wow. So using the work of other great people like Jacques Vallée and many others who have covered UFO cases during this time period that we're talking about, we found a wealth of information. And what's most fascinating to John and me is the fact that all of these cases occurred before air travel was really in place. There were some balloon travel. It was very rare in the early 1800s. It really wasn't until the 1880s, 1890s time period that we started seeing more and more balloons over North America. But especially during this early time period that our first book covers, which is 1800 to the mid-1800s, during that time period, there really basically was nothing up in the skies of North America other than birds. So
that's
it's a
so
fascinating time period.
And it's nice to just not have to have that, that interference, because now we've got so many things up in the sky. Who knows what it is? It's really hard to weed out the mundane from the fantastic. But I am really happy to have you here. I can't wait to get into some of these stories from that time period. I'm Erica Lukes here with Noe Torres and John Lemay. We're going to take our first break, and we will be right back.
Stand by. This is UFO Classified with Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
The phone lines are open now at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. More UFO Classified.
UFO Classified
with Erica Lukes on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. After this.
Radio signal.
Looking for cutting-edge conversations while exploring quantum possibilities? Then look no further.
We've got to fix Broadcast Team Alpha.
Hosted by Nori Love and Augie Nost. They're connecting the dots and unraveling the cosmic mysteries. With interviews from top experts, embedded insiders, and whistleblowers from around the world on an array of topics. From health, wellness, consciousness, and ufology. All in pursuit of
the truth.
Broadcast Team Alpha, hosted by Noe Love and Augie Nost. Live Tuesday nights at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The balance of power is shifting in the world today, and the old paradigm is being replaced with a new one filled with love, positivity, and prosperity for all. The only question you have to ask yourself: are you ready for a change?
Broadcast Team Alpha.
Come explore the quantum possibilities.
Toxins are everywhere, from the air we breathe to the food we eat and the water we drink. In a world where 80,000 known toxins and heavy metals threaten our very existence, how are you going to protect yourself and your loved ones? Introducing Pure Body Extra Strength, the world's first colloidal zeolite that helps trap and remove toxins as well as heavy metals from your body that are messing with your memory, clarity, sleep, and focus. Don't just take our word for it or the testimonials from our thousands of happy customers. Check out the hundreds of articles and case studies on the National Institute of Health website proving zeolite's powerful ability to remove toxins. For a limited time, listeners to KCOR will receive 10% off their first order. To get started, go to trypurebody.com and enter promo code Radio10. Again, that's trypurebody.com. Toxic junk is all around us, but now you can take back control of your health and protect yourself by detoxing with Pure Body Extra Strength. You'll be on your way to sleeping better, thinking more clearly, and feeling more energetic. Go to trypurebody.com right now and get started today.
Now, broadcasting in digital HD radio.
We interrupt to bring you this.
Would you like to advertise on KCOR Digital Radio Network?
This is what I'm talking about.
At a fraction of the cost of traditional radio advertising, why not?
Tell them the good news.
Whether you need to promote your next book, product, or service, we can customize a package for just about any budget.
Finally, there is hope for the hopeless.
Why limit yourself to a tiny local market when KCOR can brand you to the world?
Here's all you do.
Visit KCORradio.com or contact our sales department by email at saleskcorradio.com.
We want it now!
See the difference with us by letting us work for you.
This ain't reality TV!
The KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Are you ready to go?
It's showtime!
Here we go, world. You're listening to the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Crank this up.
Broadcasting from the heart of Las Vegas, Nevada.
Their base is so large it has to draw most of its power from the nearby nuclear fusion plant.
The future of radio is here and now.
You're listening to
UFO Classified with Erica Lukes, where the truth isn't hidden beneath the black lines of a Sharpie.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
To be on with Erica, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio.
Radio contact.
Share your thoughts on the show on Twitter by using hashtag KCOR. Or head over to the live chats at KCORradio.com.
The audience goes nuts!
And now, your host of UFO Classified.
Are you ready?
Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
Welcome back to UFO Classified. You can find my website at ufoclassified.com, ericalukes.com. You can find me on Facebook. I try to tweet, but clearly that's a big fail. But well, one of these days I'll get better on my social media. You can reach out to me there. I am excited. I'm headed to LA twice in the next week to do 2 different TV shows. So that will be a lot of fun. So I will give you updates on that and share some pictures as things progress. It's never a dull moment in the land of TV, but it will be fun. I love doing that. I am here with 2 people that I just am excited to finally talk to John. John Lemay is a lifelong Roswell native. He is the president of the Historical Society for the Southeast New Mexico area and has authored many books, nothing to do with UFOs, except now he's got this wonderful book that he wrote 10 years ago, and now he's doing 2 more books. I guess one is done, another one is on its way, about the real cowboys and aliens, UFO encounters of the Old West. And the second book is the one that I am reading, and I am stunned at the cases. They are so amazing. I'm also here with Noe Torres, who is an author, researcher, UFO investigator, and hosts one of the top 3 UFO festivals in the world, ranked, and it is incredible. I loved being there, having the opportunity to meet everybody in Edinburgh. They were gracious, and it was really a lot of fun. I hope to be back there someday soon. But welcome back, both of you. It's fun to have you on here. I'm getting great feedback about the show so far. And so you were talking a little bit about your research process. And so you must have that down pat by now, and going to different libraries and then the online databases, which you're right, Noe, that does make research a lot easier. But there is something fun about going to a library and digging through stuff.
No, Erica, I want to bring John in here in a minute, because when I linked up with John, it was just a sudden wealth of information, because John, the Historical Society for Southeast New Mexico has access to all of these primary source material files. A lot of history, as you know, happened in New Mexico and in the surrounding territories. A lot of famous Wild West figures, a lot of battles and things. So I was just thrilled to death when when I had the chance to work with John and his extensive background as a historian there. So I know he can tell us a lot more about how he became involved in that, but that his ability to do research and to access those archives and also other archives in other places just really helped our books just really take off.
Well, and I think that you're absolutely correct when you say that it's good to work with somebody that doesn't necessarily is not, in the UFO world like we are, because it does give you a different perspective. It balances you. And then with someone like John, you've got all of this information. And I love the history, and I love learning, not just about UFOs, but about all of that. And that's really, I think that's why I am in love with your second book.
I remember John's very first question to me. I think he had called me, and he said, I was just sitting here wondering, Noe, if there were actually any UFO cases from back in the Wild West. And I said, there sure were, John. I've got a whole file of cases. And one in particular that I was working on at that time was the Aurora UFO incident in Aurora, Texas in 1897. I had a whole huge file on that, where a UFO crashed in the middle of town, and the townspeople were able to drag out a body from the wreckage. It was a little guy, a little alien being that had died in the crash and was buried in the town cemetery. It's a very well-known incident that happened in Texas, and we subsequently, John and I, included it as a chapter in our first book, and we're also doing an expanded chapter for the third book of our upcoming trilogy. But that very first conversation I had with John, I'll never forget that, because he had the whole background of the Old West. He knew everything that had happened in New Mexico and in surrounding areas. And I had the UFO angle, and it was like the perfect marriage of those two worlds. Something that Spielberg did in fiction, but we did with real documented cases. So that's what I always tell the folks when I lecture about this topic, is that we were looking for real cases, not the fictional Hollywood creation that the movie focused on.
And so what was, and this question is for both of you, what was the criteria? I mean, if you found something, what made it pass the test to be able to get into the book?
I would say Noe's criteria was slightly more hard-edged than mine. See, I'm kind of more the J. Frank Dobie type, where I just like a good story. And to me, it's like if an old-timer said it, that doesn't mean I think it's true, but I think it's okay to repeat it and be like, the witness so-and-so claims this, and they claim they saw it. And to me, that's usually good enough, because I'm not trying to say, oh, it happened. I'm just saying, well, the witness said it happened. Whereas Noe will really dig in there very intelligently and get to like the truth of the matter. So there are maybe one or two stories that we included in the book that we think, yeah, they probably weren't true, but they were just such a good story. You know, how could you not include them? And especially if you can't disprove them. You know what I mean? Because some of them, yeah, you just can't disprove. So that's kind of my stance on it.
Oh, interesting. Noe, what is your, because you are a brilliant researcher. I commend you, and I really look up to you, both you and Ruben.
Well, thank you, Erica. We both think very highly of you as well. But
thank you.
To John's point, and what you were saying earlier, that it really helps to have John's historical perspective, his perspective on history and the research that he does for the Historical Society and has done, and his extensive knowledge of the archives and the Old West period. That was so incredibly helpful. But in terms of UFOs, now, when we look at UFO cases, and you know that having had a long career as a UFO researcher yourself, is we want to be as grounded as possible. And number one, the most basic or primary source materials that we can lay our hands on, like what happened closest to when the incident happened, what the eyewitnesses said, what was reported. And of course, when you're dealing with cases like we were that happened in the 19th century, some of them in the early 19th century, we have a chapter about 2 UFO sightings that were reported to Thomas Jefferson, who was then the Vice President of the United States, around the year in the early 1800s. So when you're dealing with cases from way back then, you're obviously not going to be able to interview anybody, and you're going to have very limited information, primary source materials available, but you will find some, and we did find some, for example, on the UFO sighting that I just mentioned that happened in June 1800 in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So we're looking at, I'm looking at, we've got to have some sort of documentation, some sort of documentary evidence. There has to be, and hopefully more than one source, which we always try to do. But we want to tell a good story, and we have a story, as John was talking about just now. If we have a story that is somewhat it doesn't have the evidentiary documentation that I would like to see. We tell the readers in putting together that chapter. We let them know that we don't have as much evidence as we would like. We don't have as much documentation as we would normally consider that we would need, but that we felt the story was compelling enough. And as John said, we don't know for certain that it didn't really happen. We just don't have the primary source material that we do with a lot of the other chapters that we include in this book. So it's we want to keep things lively and interesting. I love John's philosophy of telling interesting stories, compelling stories that people really will enjoy and will be amazed by, which we ran across a lot like that. And they're somewhat weak on the documentation and the evidence, but they're still worth telling. And who knows, with these stories having taken place so long ago, who can be certain if they might not have been actual events that occurred,
Absolutely. And I think that that's so important. I mean, we have this, we always focus on, after Roswell, we're focusing on that era, the modern era of UFOs. And there's so much in it, when you go back, and it's fascinating to me. And it also, when I read, I was looking through the book and reading it, the second book, it really kind of fueled my fire again, because it's like, yes, here you've got these incredible cases, witness reports, and, you don't have all of this stuff like I was mentioning before the break. You don't have mundane objects that are flying up there. I mean, there's a little bit more, it almost seems like there's a little bit more credibility to that.
Yeah. When you have witnesses describing metallic discs and strange shapes in the sky going extremely fast, doing zigzagging motions, you've got brightly illuminated craft in the middle of the night in a totally dark sky. And we're talking about pre-airplanes, in the era before airplanes, in the era before powered balloons. People were seeing these sorts of things. They're also running across strange creatures that did not seem to be quite human. A lot of times they had somewhat the similar characteristics to what we now describe as the Greys. So all of this stuff, we have a chapter about encounters with men in black way back in the 1800s. Strange creatures that didn't quite look like human, although they were humanoid, and they were dressed in black clothing, very, very similar to what we associate with after the 1940s. There were sightings. In the 40s and 50s, there were sightings of these strange beings that we now refer to as the Men in Black, that appear shortly after a UFO sighting and usually try to dissuade the eyewitnesses from speaking about what they saw. And so we discovered this amazing wealth of information about UFO cases back in the 1800s. It was just incredible.
Oh, that is so cool. And I want to talk a little bit more about the Men in Black cases, because that fascinates me. But I've got two questions from my listeners that I want to just throw out there. And first is, I have Gabe wants to know, he has heard that there are certain UFO groups that charge people to take them out to the Roswell crash site. Can you address that? Do you know about that?
Yes,
well, John, I meant to say earlier, I'm going to let John tackle this, but Erica, you were talking about going out to the Roswell crash site. Well, John took me out the very first time that I went out there, and he gave me a fantastic tour of the area. So we went out there in his pickup truck, and it was one of the best experiences of my life. So we've got to get together real soon, and all of us go out there. That would be a fantastic
That would
experience.
Be a blast. I would love
John,
that.
Tell us about what the status. It's been a few years for me since I've been out there. What's the current status of going out there?
Yeah, so I see another question, and I think I can kind of answer both of them at the same time. People are asking about multiple crash sites. So we need to be really clear. In 1947, the belief is that lightning struck the Roswell UFO craft over a town called Corona, which is about several miles north of Roswell. And the idea is that the craft, it exploded over Corona, it rained down debris. That is called the Corona debris site. Then closer to Roswell, the craft itself came down, and they call that the impact site. So there's kind of two major crash sites. In 1997, a rancher named Hub Corn, he would take people on paid tours to his ranch, and he claimed that was the alleged impact site. I believe today ufologists no longer think that was the impact site. They think it's somewhere else. But the Corona site, if you can go out to the Corona site, that's legitimate for sure. Something happened there, no doubt. There was a family who recently bought the ranch who this past summer did do paid tours to take you out to the actual debris field. And to the best of my knowledge, they have sold the property. So I don't know right now that these paid tours will continue of the debris site. So that's all I know at the moment.
Okay. And, and I know, where Gabe is, I think I know where Gabe is going with that. And I sometimes I would think if somebody's investing their time and letting you on their private property or doing things like that, I think that would be, I don't know why that would be a problem to be compensated for that.
The other thing too, if anybody wants me to take them out there again, I can honestly say I do not remember the route anymore. It's a lot of turns. Noe and I's friend E.J. Wilson basically told me where to go and which turns to take.
Oh,
so I
I've
really
got
don't remember.
turn-by-turn instructions and GPS coordinates, John.
Okay.
You don't have to worry about that.
True. That's true.
Yeah, I annotated it all down, so we don't have to worry about that.
How far away is it from the town?
3
From
hours.
Roswell?
Isn't it?
Yeah, it's
3
a
hours.
long way, and the roads are not the best. So it's quite a hike out there.
Yeah, so that's why it's 3 hours. It's not the distance; it's the quality of the roads. Once you get onto that ranch, you've got to drive really slow and cautiously. So that's another reason why you should, pay someone to take you out there. You could very well get lost or stranded. So it's not a bad thing to pay them for that.
Actually, it's at various points there are no roads. The road just disappears, and your car is going over cow patties and stuff, and
oh, good.
You're bumping up against big boulders. So
that sounds like an adventure.
Yeah, and so is going to the bathroom if you have to out there. So. Adventurous.
Well, you know what? There's nothing like living on the edge. You gotta love it. I like roughing it. I think we should make a plan and go out there. That would be fun to do a little video.
No, it was extremely fun. Despite all that, it was just fantastic. And John and I, and who went with us, John? It was EJ and...
it was just you and EJ. That was it.
Elvis didn't go, right?
No.
What about the geologist?
Yes, that was Pat Flannery and his wife Gretchen, and they went with EJ and I.
They went with EJ, that's right.
Well, that's fun. Okay, we're going to have to make a plan. We're going to meet in Roswell, and then we're going to go out there and, I don't know, get into some trouble. Could be a good time. I have a feeling.
It will be.
Maybe we can invite Ruben along.
Yeah, that's a great idea. He can fly in on his UFO.
Absolutely. He would be good that way. I would like that. I love him. So let's talk a little bit about the Men in Black. Because that, I think for most people who know a little bit about the Men in Black, like you say, that was kind of something that people associate to the 40s and 50s and Gray Barker and, all of these, that kind of time period. I still occasionally get reports of Men in Black encounters. I know Nick Redfern has been on the show many times talking about Men in Black, Women in Black encounters, but tell us a little bit about what you uncovered with the book.
Well, the story, so I think one thing we should clarify is in the public consciousness, they think of Men in Black strictly from the films, which is they're just government agents with futuristic technology. In real life accounts, they actually have these strange, supernatural, kind of almost demonic powers. The primary witness, I think, what was his name? No, was it Dr. Albert Bender? Does that sound right? Does that sound correct?
Yes, Bender, that's correct.
Okay, so back in, I think it was the 1950s, he had encounters with the Men in Black, and they basically would materialize like ghosts in his room, and they would kind of smell like sulfur, and they would harass Dr. Bender about his UFO research, and they would tell him, you need to drop this, we don't want you revealing this to the public. So really, they're kind of like paranormal entities rather than normal human beings. And so that was the basis of the story that we found from 1864. It's really not UFO related so much as it's just a Men in Black story where this family living out in the woods were harassed by these strange men that wore all black suits, and they were kind of like poltergeists that would throw rocks at their home. And this was during the Civil War, and this family they were peace Democrats, which were kind of like protesters to the war, although they tended to side more with the Confederates. And but the idea was that these men in black were trying to harass these people off of their homestead, but they were, they had supernatural powers. And we've also found that's only in this first book, but in the next 2 books we will have even more Men in Black stories. And in one of them, some witnesses actually saw a man in black exit a UFO.
And what year was that?
1875 for the UFO story, I believe.
Wow. Oh, that's going to be cool. I can't wait to hear about that. And I have to just throw in there, it was really funny. I have a 1965 Ford Galaxy convertible, and that thing is my baby. I love it. But Nick Redfern he actually sent me a case of Men in Black UFO sighting, and the Men in Black were driving Galaxies. So I was very excited about that for some weird reason. You gotta love those Men in Black cases. But that's so like that, and I mean and so you're mentioning like the supernatural, the demonic aspect. I mean, how much of this? I mean, do you think there were some occult things in there? I mean, what are your beliefs on kind of the nature of the Men in Black?
I hadn't really researched the Men in Black a whole lot before this, so I might actually defer to Noe and kind of ask what he thinks about that.
Hey, John, before we go into that, I did want to mention that John just touched on a couple of cases, but what's really interesting about this time period, the 19th century, is that there were actually numerous reports that we found throughout the 1800s time period of strange men dressed all in black that would appear often at the same time as some paranormal event was going on, whether it was a strange craft that had descended from the sky or whether it was some kind of ghostly apparition. And in some cases, later when airship sightings became more common, the airship occupants themselves were dressed in black and had kind of that Men in Black vibe. So there's a lot to this story, and some of it my interest in it is mainly regarding the UFO, the similarities to modern UFO Men in Black sightings, and not so much the occult.
Oh, that is so interesting. I love it, and I can't wait to hear more and just to pick your brain about all of this. And I want to ask, because we're getting ready to go to break here really quickly, but John, tell us a little bit about the other books that you've written so people can learn more about you and get your books.
I think the book that your listeners would probably find the most interesting is I did a similar book to Cowboys and Aliens called Cowboys and Saurians, as in dinosaurs. So it's all about cryptozoology in the Old West and pioneers that claim they saw dinosaurs. And maybe we can talk later, but that was actually what led me to contacting Noe again after all these years to ask him if he wanted to do a sequel finally to Cowboys and Aliens.
That is so cool. Okay, we've got to talk more about that. I'm Erica Lukes here with Noe Torres and John Lemay. We're going to take our big break, and we will be back very shortly.
Listen very carefully.
This is Houston. Say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem.
This is UFO Classified, live every Friday night, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The truth is out there, just waiting to be discovered.
And now, if you will, accompany me on a journey to the future.
For more information on the host of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes, upcoming guests, as well as links to the past shows,
visit her website at ufoclassified.com.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just south of Area 51.
Wait, that doesn't exist.
This is the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Now for the news.
This landed at a ranch at Corona, New Mexico, and the rancher turned it over to the Air Force. Rancher W.W. Brazil was the man who discovered the saucer. what I thought was a star began coming in my direction at a very rapid rate of speed.
The unidentified object, which some sources thought might be a blimp, moved slowly down the Pacific coast from Santa Monica and disappeared south of Long Beach.
I saw a UFO, and it went down the river, turned right at the United Nations, turned left, and then down the river.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
No more plausible deniability. Fact, fiction, or the truth. You decide. And now, the new voice of the high desert, the hostess of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes.
Welcome back to the second half of UFO Classified. Happy to be here, and I want to thank all of the people that support the show. The list is growing, and it means the world to me. This is a listener-supported show, and I have a lot of love in that regard. I do this because I care immensely about the topic, and I truly feel that it is something that we need to know about. We need to educate ourselves. We need to preserve the history and get good information out to the public. And that seems to be sometimes very difficult, especially with the current goings-ons in the UFO field. But we will persevere and get good information out. So thank you for your support. I also want to thank everyone for getting into chat. All of my favorite people are here tonight with me, and I can't think of a better way to spend a Friday night, so thank you very much. I am here with Noe Torres and John Lemay. Noe hosts a conference, puts together the third best conference, or one of the three top conferences in the world, and that is coming up this Friday, April 3rd, 2020, and you don't want to miss that. If you're in the area, go. It is really fun. So Noe, just when we give us a little bit more information about that, so people know how to get tickets and attend the event.
Yeah, Erica, thank you very much for those kind words. It's been, just as you mentioned that in your intro, that you, the purpose behind your show is to get really good information about UFO research out to the community. And that was really the intent behind the conference in Edinburgh. We had this strange event in town back in 1966 where a UFO essentially shot a beam of fire down and demolished a construction site where 8 men were working. And as the RV in which they were spending the nights and all of their earth-moving equipment just became a blazing inferno behind them, they ran for their lives. And the local sheriff's department made contact with them, and they were just terrified out of their minds. So that became known as the Edinburgh UFO incident, and it was witnessed by a sheriff's deputy who later became a county commissioner and a big influential person here in Edinburgh. By the name of Milo Ponce, and his son is the one who brought it to our attention most recently. And that was the impetus for creating the UFO conference, which is now in its 9th year. 2020 will be its 9th year. And our interest then, because there is no UFO organization or group that started this event, not that having a UFO group start an event is a bad thing, not at all. But this was an impetus from the local community based on interest in the topic. A number of people, the local library director and a number of the fine arts coordinator and a number of other local people who had an interest in the topic and thought that it would be good to have a series of lectures on the topic, and so we started with a series of lectures, and that grew into an annual UFO conference, which continues today. And the primary motivation being that we want to get the good information about what's happening in the field, the latest information possible, out to the community, which has expressed so much interest. And so we have a website called EdinburghUFO.com, and Edinburgh is spelled EDINBURG, EDINBURG, EdinburghUFO.com. And we have information at that website about the conference, how to obtain tickets, upcoming speakers, the schedule, the venue. And right now, of course, it's kind of bare because we're still quite a long ways away from April 2020. But as the date grows closer, we're going to have a lot more information there. And but there is information about past conferences that we've held, including videos of our presentations from the April 2019 event. So if there's anyone of your listeners from the Texas area, or people that are able to be down here with us at that time, we would certainly invite them to. We have folks that are joining us now in recent years from all over the United States, and even some people from outside the United States. Of course, we get a lot of visitors from Mexico who are interested in the topic and come up because Edinburgh is right along the South Texas border with Mexico. So we get people from Mexico who come up for the conference. We had a delegation from Monterrey come this past April.
Oh, wow.
And including a number of pretty well-known UFO researchers from Monterrey. So, and there's a lot of opportunities to meet folks who are interested in the field from all over. So, and we always try to bring the most interesting speakers that we can. We've moved around the date early on. We tried several different dates, like we tried a summer date. But we moved around the dates to try to find a place where we can be the most successful at getting speakers who aren't engaged for other major UFO events. So we finally settled on April. It seems to be good for most potential speakers and most of the folks that we'd like to have come speak. And so now we're doing April exclusively. And the other interesting angle of it, Erica, is that the more years have gone by that we've had this annual event, the more local residents have come forward to tell us of their UFO encounters. We had one of the most fascinating cases of an abduction that happened to a gentleman in McAllen, Texas, which is the neighboring town right next to Edinburgh. And his story, he came up and he told his story on stage at a little event, a little pre-conference event we hold the night before. And the audience that showed up for that was just fascinated by his firsthand account of seeing that object, pulling his car over. He and his brother, they witnessed this huge metallic disc that hovered over their vehicle. And in their minds, they thought they had gotten back in their vehicle and driven on back home in McAllen. When years later, they both realized that they had lost about half an hour. And then memories started to set in about being aboard that ship. And but as I say, what's interesting is these stories have all come out from local people who in the past may have been terribly uncomfortable about telling what happened to them to anybody, but since now there is this small community of people who are interested in the topic, we have an annual event. The media, the local media, has been great about covering our event, and in a positive way. You know, coverage isn't always positive, as you well know.
Absolutely.
But the local media has been fantastic about it. And I work for a school district here in South Texas, and they've been fantastic about my involvement in this field as well. In fact, the school district has its own television station that it runs for the school district, and they've featured my books and interviews with me as part of their school district programming, which I thought was incredibly cool.
That is really cool.
You know, some people worry about how being in the field might affect their employment prospects.
Right.
You know, have you ever heard anyone talk about that?
Oh, absolutely. I think we all get a little bit nervous about that because it's.
But in my case, it's been great. Yeah, it's like you say, you never know. But in my case, I've just been so fortunate because not only have they not been. Have not questioned it, but they seem to have embraced it in many ways, which I'm thankful for.
That's really important. But I mean, and I could tell that you had a very cohesive and supportive community being down there at the festival, and I really appreciated that. And I think it's neat that you get funding from the city to do that. That speaks volumes about the caliber of people and the fact that they want information and they have open minds, and that's really cool.
And the other cool thing about it, Erica, is that it wasn't something to where a conference idea was imposed upon them, or it didn't take a sales job. Nobody came and did a sales job and said to them, you should have a UFO conference because it's a great marketing thing for your city and it's going to draw tourists here. That wasn't it at all. It was a group of people who were already interested in the topic. And then they heard that there was this weird guy who lived in Edinburgh already and had appeared several times on Coast to Coast and on the History Channel and was going around the country talking about UFOs. And so they already had an interest in the topic, and there was this weird guy, me, living in Edinburgh, born and raised in Edinburgh. So that's when they first approached me about possibly having a conference. So it was another case of things just fell into place, just like with John Lemay and me.
That is so cool. I love that, and like I said, it was one of my favorite experiences. It was just a really wonderful time, and I loved going to that Mexican restaurant for dinner and hearing the mariachi band, and just lots of good memories.
I think that was the first year we did it when you attended the conference, and we've done it every year since then because, all the speakers just loved it, and. So it has become a tradition. You'll have to come down and we'll do it again. That
would be fun. I would love that. And and thank you for doing that. I think it really, being a business owner, I know how hard it is, to put something like this together. And it's great that you've got the support of the community to do that. And I just wish you the best of luck with that. And I want to throw something in here because I am absolutely stunned, John, that you are 33 years old and you've written 14 books.
Oh, I'm actually 34 and I've written 17 books.
Holy mother of pearl! I've got my facts wrong, but okay.
Oh, it's okay.
Are you kidding? So you were 22 when you wrote your first book? Is that right?
I did. Noe was very gracious to me because shortly after he was doing his book, Amazing Guide to the Roswell UFO Crash, which is like a guidebook where it takes you around town and shows you where these historical landmarks are. And he asked me if I would do a historical essay on Roswell's history, which I did. And I had a book that I had written that I couldn't get published. I think I had sent it to Pear Review Press or somebody, and they didn't want it. And it was called Roswell, USA. And it was all about towns across America that took Roswell's example and started promoting like this Fortean crypto tourism, like Point Pleasant, West Virginia does Mothman. Some towns are all about Bigfoot or lake monsters. And, I thought it was a really great idea. And I told Noe how I was struggling with the book, and he very graciously agreed to publish that for me through his imprint, RoswellBooks.com. And then it was shortly after that he and I talked about the Real Cowboys and Aliens idea, because we wanted to release that in conjunction with the film. So Noe has definitely done a lot for my career. So thank you, Noe, for that.
Well, it's been a load of fun, and it's been more fun than a barrel of monkeys working with you, John. I've really enjoyed it. And we just jibe. We're like on the same wavelength, even though we hardly ever see each other in person. But we do communicate a lot on a daily basis. So it's tremendous. It's and Ruben Uriarte has also been a very helpful partner in our endeavors as well. So he's always lurking in the background. Isn't that right, John?
Absolutely. He's a great help to us.
Oh, he's such a kind man. I mean, he was, when I first joined MUFON and became a field investigator and then state director. I mean, he was one of my favorite people in the organization. He was just very helpful and kind and supportive, and that really meant the world to me.
Well, in a way, we're kind of the three musketeers, John and Ruben and I. And John, we're all going to have to get together real soon and have a Whataburger together, maybe.
Oh, I hope so. That would be great.
Okay, and so I'm just, I want to talk a little bit about the Mount Adams, the encounter at Mount Adams, if you don't mind going there.
So, Erica, what the problem is with being an author is by the time you're promoting your book, you're like deep into another book and you've forgotten a lot of the details. That's the only problem with stuff like this. Mount Adams was written about through the lens of religion more so than UFOs. At the time, it was like a spiritual sighting where a man, didn't he think he was seeing angels or something, Noe, and he was seeing the ghosts of these dead soldiers? And actually, Erica, since you just read the book, you can actually probably explain it better than I can.
Well, you know what? I think we should let Noe do that because I am thinking that he's got more information on that.
I actually wrote that chapter, but Noe's
really?
It. And that's why I'm saying it's bad. I'm already on book 3, so it's hard for me to recall that one very well. But
actually, that was a story that really, really impressed me. Even though John did most of the grunt work on it, I was really very impressed by it because Mount Adams is actually a very famous place because it was one of the places that was kind of discovered by Lewis and Clark during their famous expedition. And what happened there was something that seemed to be a UFO sighting. There were reports of strange lights and activities that have been seen by the Native Americans of the area, and there were like lights hovering in the area. And there was this gentleman who had a vision of seeing creatures or humanoids in the area. And there's actually, it's like a whole series of stories about strange, unearthly events that happened in that area. And it also, John, remember, it had to do with a massacre that had happened in that area. And so it was just a series of paranormal events with Native Americans saying that there were strange lights, strange music, there were images floating through the air, there were, what they viewed as being spirits, disembodied spirits. And there's a lot of similarities to later UFO encounters. There is a mention of some kind of a silver-shaped, silver-colored object. And so now, one thing that I found very interesting is that supposedly in the visions of these creatures that were seen, the description given was that it was a line of uncouth forms, and that's a direct quote, a line of uncouth forms, which to us seems to indicate that these were some type of beings that seem to have emerged from that silvery UFO which the person that was describing what he saw later had difficulty describing in full detail what he saw. But what I thought was really, really interesting was the fact that there was a ship, there was a silver ship, and out of this ship came these beings which he described as a line of uncouth forms. And to me, it sounded like there was, there was some relationship to more modern UFO sightings. There was the appearance of a craft followed by the appearance of humanoid beings. So all of that for the time period in which it occurred, which was 1816, to me, that was an incredible event that occurred so long ago.
I mean, that's incredible. And I mean, I actually a couple years ago went up to speak at ECETI, which is, very close to Mount Adams, and have done a lot of research on Yakima, the Yakima Indian Reservation, and specific sightings in that area. I've had Greg Long on my show a couple times to talk about his book that deals with Yakima sightings, and it's that place to have a sighting that you're talking about that dates back that far is very, very powerful, because that it just helps give more information. And it's like Skinwalker, Skinwalker Ranch, and you went to Basin, you find all of this current stuff we've got back to the 60s, thanks to Junior Hicks. But then you start learning more about sightings that took place in the last century, and it's like, this is so cool.
There's something that's very important as we've done our research into these cases, and we can continue talking more about it after the break. But one very important angle that we found, Erica, is that you have to always, when you're doing this research, you always have to put yourself into the mind of a person in the 19th century. What kind of vocabulary would they have? What kind of background would they have in terms of what the universe is like and what religious beliefs are involved? The language that you're going to encounter, the descriptions that you're going to encounter are those of a person living a long, long time ago with a whole different outlook on things, with a whole different educational system and foundation. And so you cannot try to assess what they are telling you in terms of today and today's language and today's syntax. You have to push past the time eras that stand between you and the original witness, and you have to make that extra effort to understand what they're trying to describe to you.
Oh, I love that. This is so cool. I love it. I love it. I love it. And clearly cool is the word of the evening that I'm choosing to use, but this is really amazing to me. And I've got one of my listeners and show's supporters, RJ, who was just saying that the earlier the incidents, the more bizarre. And I think that he's hit that right on the head. It's fascinating. I'm Erica Lukes here with Noe Torres and John Lemay. We will be back after this.
Stand by.
This is UFO Classified with Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
The phone lines are open now at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. More UFO Classified.
UFO Classified
with Erica Lukes on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. After this. KCOR Las Vegas.
All the time.
Of course I listen.
I listen all day. It's the best music.
KCOR, the new underground source for news, talk, and music at KCORradio.com. Tell your friends, email them, or Facebook them, or Twitter them.
Hey, are we done here? Because I'm losing my buzz.
There is a world outside that which we live in, a realm where fact and fiction collide, The Paradigm Matrix. The Paradigm Matrix. Hosted by Willie Miranda. Every Friday night at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern.
The Matrix is everywhere. It is all around us, even now in this very room.
The 1 hour show that will surely leave you hanging on the edge of the rabbit hole. The Paradigm Matrix explores a universe of topics from UFOs, cryptozoology, conspiracies, as well as all things paranormal.
Enter a world of the twisted and deformed.
Friday night, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. The Paradigm Matrix. Exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network, where fact and fiction collide.
Vegas, baby!
Vegas' #1 source for talk and new music.
How cool is that?
Are you ready? Ready to go inside the Matrix? Inside the Matrix.
You see, whoever controls technology controls the world.
Then tune in Sundays at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, as your host, Jimmy Brent, takes you deep inside the holographic Matrix.
Carefully designed to stimulate the mind.
Come explore a world of topics from technology, archaeology, spirituality, and so much more. Inside the Matrix will liberate you from the manipulated, parasitic entities of consciousness.
You guys ready for this?
It's time to claim your true natures as creative, divine beings inside the Matrix. Hosted by Jimmy Brent.
Who are we talking about?
Jimmy Brent. Live Sundays at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. Exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Inside the Matrix. Investigating and analyzing the experience of life. Life.
To the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Love the music. Oh, I listen all day.
The future of radio is here and now.
Based on the concept that Plato simply called the Great Year, where evidence points to our world civilization being far older than we've been taught. The Emissary, Book 1 by Tamra Veach and Rennie DeFazio, embraces this concept while blending elements of fantasy, reincarnation, action-adventure, and ancient secrets all together, along with our real-world history, to create an epic tale that will leave you asking the question, is this real? The Emissary, Book 1, now available for 99 cents for a limited time at Amazon.com.
You're listening to UFO Classified with Erica Lukes, where the truth isn't hidden beneath the black lines of a Sharpie.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
To be on with Erica, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio.
Radio contact.
Share your thoughts on the show on Twitter by using hashtag KCOR. Or head over to the live chats at KCORradio.com.
The audience goes nuts.
And now, your host of UFO Classified.
Are you ready?
Erica Lukes. Erica Lukes.
It is with great sorrow that I come back to the last segment of my show because I could talk and talk and talk all night. I love the people that I bring on. This is a fascinating conversation. Again, I want to thank everybody who takes the time and the effort and contributes to my show and gets in here and I just really like. I know I say this a lot, and I don't mean to be cheesy, but I can't help it. I really am very appreciative of everyone that supports me and UFO Classified. I'm here today with Noe Torres and John Lemay. Both of them are archivists, historians, authors. They've contributed a great deal, and I love what I have been reading, The Real Cowboys and Indians, Early American UFOs. We were talking before we went to break about the Mount Adams, that sighting, and I just love it's so cool to hear reports that date back that far with regard to this area, because it's a very special area. You know, it's much like the Uinta Basin, as I mentioned. But Noe, you mentioned that you really wanted to kind of drive home a certain point, so I will let you take off with that.
Yeah, we were talking before the break how important it is for us as modern day researchers, looking back at these cases which occurred 200 years ago, it's very important for us not to carry our own 21st century perspective on technology, on the universe, on scientific learning that has so accelerated over the past few decades. It's important for us to not carry that baggage, as valuable and important as it is to us today in understanding our universe and our lives. It's important that we don't carry that back when we're looking at cases that occurred 200 years ago, because we have to try to see what these eyewitnesses were seeing back in the 1800s when they encountered this UFO hovering right in front of them. They are struggling to put that vision into the words of a very unfamiliar vocabulary to them. I mean, they did not know about rocket ships, jet planes, nuclear power, atomic energy. They didn't know about the universe, the structure of the universe, very little about it. And so, you can read something like the visions of this man at Mount Adams and the reports of Native Americans about a silvery ship that disgorged these little beings. And you can read those and you can say, well, that sounds like a fairy tale. Maybe the person was intoxicated on some kind of hallucinogen, or you can try to put yourself in the mind of someone who is experiencing something truly unique that they do not have the vocabulary to completely express in terms that we can understand in the 21st century. And so what John and I always try to do in this historical research is we try to put ourselves in the minds of people of that time period. And it's almost like time traveling yourself when you do this. And John certainly has the background as a researcher, as a longtime researcher of this time period. And I also have looked at it, many UFO cases from the 19th century. So I think we have really become focused on understanding the level at which a lot of these witnesses were at in terms of vocabulary and so forth. And you have to do that because otherwise you're going to be tempted to just dismiss these as something other than what they really were, which were legitimate UFO sightings.
Oh, and I love that, and I think that's a very valid point, and it's critical for all of us researchers to think about. And the more I hear you talk, the more I really feel that it was. I mean, we should be looking way back then because things were so unadulterated. I mean, people were having these genuine experiences, and even though they have different ways of expressing themselves, there was a lot less likely to get, they didn't have the social media influence and the influence of TV shows and all of these things that we see now, which unfortunately are kind of tainting things because we have different governments that are trying to push information in certain directions for certain reasons. And so I think that is really, really neat. I love it.
Let's say in the 1800s, you were witnessing a strange object in the sky, and it's an elongated, cylindrical, we would say, object that seems to be, because of the atmosphere of the clouds, it seems to be undulating through the sky. And you report that to your local newspaper man as being a sky serpent, a serpent in the sky, or some other creature, a biological creature. Now, that to me, that doesn't mean it actually was a creature. As a UFO researcher, that was a cylindrical object which, to the observer struggling to understand in terms of their intelligence, in terms of the time period. So John and I had a lot of these sightings of serpents in the sky and other strange, unusual shapes. And we know that a lot of them have been looked at by other very high-level UFO researchers, including Jacques Paulet and many others, and have determined that these seem to be legitimate UFO sightings of a very early time period. And what it is, again, is putting yourself into the minds and vocabulary of someone from the 19th century instead of trying to impose our modern understanding of science and the universe into that time period.
Absolutely. I love that. I love it. Love it. And so, I mean, I want to talk a little bit, because we've just got about 20 minutes left, but about the crash in the Rocky Mountains.
Yeah, that was one of our favorites, and John and I both really loved that one. And in fact, we included it in our early book, in the book that we wrote primarily for a school age audience, and we wanted to kind of amplify and expand on it in this first book of the trilogy that we are now working on. And it's originally, John and I we were wondering if there was a Roswell-like incident that might have happened during this time period in question. And we found in September 1864, we found just such an incident that occurred in Montana, which is where a fur trapper named James Lumley, was out in the wilds in the Rocky Mountains in September of 1864 when he saw this bright object come streaking through the sky, and he saw it. And this was documented, by the way, in several newspapers of the time period, and we found the actual original articles. It was printed in many, many newspapers of the time. And what Lumley, the principal eyewitness, described was a, quote, bright luminous body in the heavens, which was moving with a great rapidity in an easterly direction. And within a few seconds after he spotted it, there was this tremendous explosion in the sky, and the object seemed to split into several smaller objects. And what happened next is that there was a tremendous explosion that shook the ground below his feet, and there was this sudden gust of wind that swept through the forest and actually bent a number of trees over all around him. And the newspaper article, one of the newspaper articles that was printed, said, a few minutes later, he, the principal eyewitness, heard a heavy explosion which jarred the earth very perceptibly, and this was shortly after followed by a rumbling sound like a tornado sweeping through the forest. A strong wind sprang up about the same time, but as suddenly subsided, the air was filled with a peculiar odor of a sulfurous character. So, just moving along to hit on the highlights here is that he later he traveled closer to where he thought that the object may have actually come down, and he found embedded on the side of a mountain, embedded into the side of the mountain, what he described as being an immense stone. Now, here, Erica, is a perfect example of what I was talking about earlier, is he doesn't have the vocabulary to describe this as a rocket ship or as a spaceship, and so to him it was a huge cylindrical or circular object embedded on the side of a mountain. It probably picked up debris. It had burn marks probably from going through the Earth's atmosphere. It was scarred, pitted, and to him it looked like an immense stone. So we can't let the vocabulary that's being used by these witnesses 200 years ago, we can't let that interfere with our understanding of what happened here. Now, he saw that the object was divided into compartments, which John and I thought was extremely interesting. There were certain different specifically you could point out that there were different compartments to it. And then the most interesting part of the story is that there were what the witness described as what appeared to be hieroglyphics, similar to the writings of ancient Egypt, carved upon the object, according to the newspaper account which he later gave. And it said, he, referring to the eyewitness, he, Lemay, is confident that the hieroglyphics were the work of human hands, and that the stone itself, although but a fragment of an immense object or of an immense body, must have been used for some purpose by animated beings. Now, I think when he says the work of human hands, he's referring to some type of being, not necessarily from Earth, but in any event, he later says that there were obviously animated beings involved in its construction and the construction of this object, which we know that nobody on Earth at that time could have possibly come up with a ship of this kind. Now, the also interesting part, and we include the entire text of the newspaper article in our book, which is actually quite lengthy. It was also picked up in many major newspapers of the time, including the Chicago Tribune, the Herald and Torchlight of Maryland, the Weekly Republican, and many, many others. So it wasn't like an isolated little blurb that happened in a backwoods weekly newspaper or something. This was a big thing that was very well known back at the time it happened in 1864, and the following year a lot more accounts happened were published a year later. So it's an amazing story, and John and I and Ruben and I have also speculated on. We were wondering, there are some elements to this story that seem to have similarities with the later novels of H.G. Wells, specifically War of the Worlds, and we can't help but wonder if H.G. Wells might not have been, at least in part, inspired to write War of the Worlds, and some of the descriptions in the book from the James Lumley case of 1864. It's a very interesting early UFO crash story.
Wow.
So, yeah.
That is fascinating.
And a lot of people are totally unaware of that, that this happened, and long before Roswell. I mean, how many years from 1864 to 1947? That's a really long time.
Right. So what has been, I mean, for both of you, what has been the most compelling case that you've come across? What's your favorite, each of you?
John, you want to give us your favorite?
I don't know about compelling. Yeah, I think with me, again, I get caught up in the stories. The first one that comes to mind, and it's not in this book, it'll be in the second book. A sword crashed to Earth from the heavens. A man saw like a meteor descend onto Earth, and he inspected, the impact site, and he finds this giant sword, as in literally a sword that like a giant would hold, and it also had strange hieroglyphic writing on it. And what I love about the story is you can interpret it either as an extraterrestrial story, or you could interpret it as perhaps a story about an angel, like a spiritual celestial story. So that's the first one that popped into my mind that really grabbed my interest, because it's just so different from your typical airship or alien story. So that might be my favorite so far.
And so Noe, what is yours? I mean, because I know that all of them are so unique, and they probably all, have a soft spot in your heart. But I mean, there's got to be one that just blows your mind.
Well, yeah, there are several actually, and before I tell you one that I really like from our just released first book of the new set of 3, I do want to say, however, that the most impressive thing to me about doing these 3 books with John is that there are so many stories. The preponderance of evidence of what I consider to be, for the most part, well-documented
UFO sightings from prior to the year 1915. In this first book, we're talking about 1800 to 1865. So very early in the history of our country, the United States, here in North America, people were seeing an amazing number of strange objects and strange beings associated with these objects. And so the vast number, the wealth of information and the preponderance of these cases, even though some of the cases may sound kind of they're not extremely detailed. The sightings did not occur over a long period of time. There were not many witnesses. In many cases, we had 2 or 3 witnesses. In a few cases, just a single witness. But just the fact that there are so many, to me, is really staggering. One story that I particularly like from from the first of these new books in the series is one which we titled "Houston, We Have Giant Aliens." And it's a story that was told by an old sailor of an encounter that was, and it was published in the May 2nd, 1897 edition of the Houston Post newspaper. The old sailor tells a story of having encountered a very mysterious airship while out to sea. Actually, it happened in the Indian Ocean, and so he was recounting the reason it didn't appear until 1897 is because 1897 was when a lot of airship sightings were being reported throughout the United States, and so there was an intense amount of interest in airships at the time. The incident that was recounted in the Houston newspaper in 1897 actually occurred in 1862, and it was a retrospective look at something that had happened to this ship that was out in the Indian Ocean when it was caught up in a storm, and some of the ship shattered into fragments on a reef, basically, a small island, and the men were cast upon it. And then this airship appeared over them. So at first they thought that they were concerned and frightened. They were also possibly hopeful to some extent that perhaps they could find some way to be rescued. And then the airship itself crashed into a rocky ledge close by. And the sailor scrambled up to see what it was all about. And in the remains of this crashed airship, they found the bodies of these, that what can only be described as giants. The bodies were bronze color. They were much larger than normal human beings. But what was really interesting is they found in the crash of the ship, they found edible food. They found enough to sustain them, and they also were able to. They found tools, although the tools were of a much larger size than what would be normal for human hands to use. The giants from the crash of the airship were estimated to be more than 12 feet high. Their hair and beard were very long. And so littered among the wreckage of the airship were many items of strange tools, furniture, metal boxes covered with undecipherable characters that seemed to be printed on rather than handwritten. I thought that was a very interesting description. Most of the tools were very large in size, making it difficult for the humans to use them. And they were able to use the materials and some of the smaller tools to construct a vessel, a ship, from which a raft, actually, from which they were able to escape this isolated rocky island upon which they were, and they were later rescued by a passing Russian ship that was sailing for Australia. So that was an amazing story in its complexity and its level of detail and its believability. And so that is one of my favorite of the stories that John and I ran across for this first book.
I love it, and honestly, like I was saying, that reading this book, it has given me, it's kind of re-inspired me, because sometimes you get so caught up with, the current goings-ons and the politics and all of this, that's like you lose kind of that touch or focus with really, really important cases and human experiences. And at the end of the day, that's why I know all three of us are here, is because we understand that people are having experiences, and that we need to be taking that seriously. We need to be looking back at the history of it. And I just really am excited for both of you with this. You've done a beautiful job. I love it.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure, and it's been a pleasure working with John.
Well, I would say so. I think John is quite accomplished, and I want to get John back on the show and just talk about some of his other books, like Frogtown, and The Hidden History of Southeast New Mexico. I'm just sitting here looking at this list of books about monsters and the spaghetti westerns and all of these things, and it just sounds like, God, John, you just sound like you have so much knowledge, and you're so diverse in everything that you do. So that's very, very, very interesting to me. So I'm going to be reaching out to you.
I'm all over the place, so that sounds good to me.
I would love that. And also Tall Tales and Half-Truths of Billy the Kid. Just to prepare yourself, you're coming back on the show.
Okay,
and it might not have anything to do with UFOs. We can just talk about Billy the Kid and monsters and all sorts of things. I think that'd be
I have
awesome.
a Billy the Kid UFO story for the show if I do come back, so no problem there.
Sweet. I would love that. And so thank you both for coming on here tonight. I'm Erica Lukes here with Noe Torres and John Lemay. I will be providing links to their sites, and you can definitely check them out. If you're in Edinburgh, please go to the UFO Festival. That is so much fun. I love it. I want to just take a moment to thank Robert Schaefer, who just contributed to my website with an article on getting started in astronomy. And yes, Robert Schaefer he might, instill the sense of fear in some people in the UFO field, but he has become a friend of mine and is contributing, and we're sharing our passion for astronomy. I really appreciate that. So thank you, Robert. I'm Erica Lukes. It has been a wonderful night. Stick around for Willie Miranda, who will be up next. Have a safe and wonderful Halloween, and we'll catch you next Friday.
Listen very carefully.
This is Houston. Say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem.
This is UFO Classified, live every Friday night, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The truth is out there, just waiting to be discovered.
And now, if you will, accompany me on a journey to the future.
For more information on the host of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes, upcoming guests, as well as links to the past shows,
visit her website at ufoclassified.com.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a